Hi, this is Dave Belsky, your host of the Sunset Session. Today I have a guest who is fantastic, Kyle Kazan, CEO of Glasshouse Group. Kyle, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dave.
Glasshouse Group operates Glasshouse Farms, which is the largest cannabis greenhouse operational in California. Currently, I believe it's up there. Also 4 retail locations that do delivery, including Bud and Bloom, the pharmacy, and what is that one in LA? The Pottery, and also produces Glasshouse Farms branded flower, which will end up somewhere in the top 3 or 4 flower brands in the state this year, Field Extracts amongst other brands. So thank you for joining and fitting it in. Now, I always like to start with, what was your background before cannabis, before starting Glasshouse Group?
So how far back do you want me to go back?
Let's start off with their USC basketball star days, where you were, all conference Pac-10.
Yeah. So for basketball fans back in the late '80s that remember USC, which was a 7th place in the Pac-10, you had to stay and eat all of your popcorn to see me play. I was more of a come in the game and mop up an already mopped up game. So yeah. But I played 3 years. 3 years for a Hall of Fame coach at USC.
Yeah, but I mean, everyone needs. It takes something to stay with a team when you're not getting play time, just to be part of the story.
Look, I had a ball. I did get a little bit of time here and there, and people would see me on CBS and call me up. And back then we couldn't text, and it was a really fun time. And I wouldn't trade it. I learned a lot from Coach Raveling.
And then after basketball, faced with the real world, post-graduation, what did you do after college?
So I worked as an inner city special ed teacher down in South Central Los Angeles for 4 years. A little school. If you watch the movie Menace to Society, at the very opening, it shows my school as it goes into Jordan High School and Jordan Downs housing projects.
Wow. And then you became a police officer.
Yeah, but on the side I was doing, I had a t-shirt company because we had unrest back in April of '92, and I didn't understand why I'm passing all of these press conferences and our mayor and our council people, and they're doing ribbon cuttings, and then nothing happens. It was just placation of the folks in South Central that were so upset. And so we started, myself and my teacher's assistant, we actually started a company called Streetwise Clothes, and we had taggers who I thought really made some pretty cool art, put that onto shirts. And so we had it selling in a chain called Hot Topic. And
Hot Topic?
Yeah.
Popular with the teenagers.
Yeah, we were on Power 106, which was a big time.
Big boy in the morning?
It wasn't Big Boy in the morning. It was an afternoon or an evening show we were on. But so it was a really interesting idea, and it also I learned a lot of lessons about and became somewhat jaded about the government response and again placation of people to just get them to be quiet and get back into their place and so. But I was also buying real estate on the side because as a school teacher, you don't make a lot of money, and then they cut my pay 11% because we were in a recession, and so I just started buying some rental real estate and got into that, and then after 4 years, I was hired by the Torrance Police Department, so they doubled my salary from being a school teacher to now enforcing the law, and I was a Torrance police officer for 5 years from 1994 to 1999.
And as a Torrance police officer, a lot of what you saw, was enforcement against drug-related crimes.
Yeah, the American drug war still on in such a big way. And I led the department for 2 different 6-month periods. So for 20% of my time, I was making the most felony and the most misdemeanor arrests. And so and most of those were drug. Most of those were drug possession.
And at what point did you get disenfranchised with law enforcement and take in a different direction? So
I never got disenfranchised with law enforcement. The men and women out there, we need them. If you don't have law enforcement, enforcing laws in society, you have anarchy. You have 2 choices. Right. That's pretty much it. And so, but the drug war itself that's what I became disenchanted about. Helping somebody, trying to make sure, if somebody stole a car or somebody put a gun to somebody's head or somebody killed somebody. I was at murder scenes and made arrests, arrested some people for 187 PC. That was gratifying. Taking somebody dangerous off the street was a good thing. But the drug war, I made less and less arrests as my career was kind of coming to an end because my businesses were growing and I just was having difficulty doing both. That was the conundrum I was in.
Sure. And then your business were property management, and that's where you got your kind of start as an entrepreneur, and over after leaving the police force, the property management business grew into beachfront property, which has how many units?
So we had purchased 250 units. I put partnerships together. My business partner that I met back then, 24 years ago, we started doing that, and once we had about 250 units, I actually took a pay cut to leave the police department and start a management company. It had about $15–20 million worth of real estate at the time. Today, that company manages about 7,500 units. I'm still the majority owner, even though I don't spend a lot of time focused there. And it managed about $2.8 billion worth of real estate.
Wow. Well, we'll come back to your story in a second, tie that into kind of present day events, but. Sure. But obviously a very unique background for someone running a modern, legal, recreational cannabis company in California, right?
100%. What I would tell you is the bridge was actually LEAP. LEAP is Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, is what it used to be. Now it's Law Enforcement Action Partnership. And it's basically retired, some active duty, but mainly retired law enforcement, so police, DAs, and judges. And what they do is they speak out. Back then it was against prohibition, against the drug war. That was the mission. They've broadened their mission to social justice and bettering law enforcement in society today. And so back in '08, I started speaking very publicly. Pissed off some of my police friends, frankly, but they knew me. The ones that knew me well, they knew I'll speak my mind. And I just wanted to speak out from my experience at what a failure, an absolute failure the drug war has been. And you brought up our CFO, who you kindly brought to us. You did a great job in helping to fill my company with great people at FlowerHire. But I told Derek, I'm like, hey man, we were talking. I go, watch The Wire from 2000 or 2001 on HBO. You will see. Tell me who the bad people are. Yeah, they're just people.
Right. And
at the end of the day, when I earned my badge, my wife pinned it on, it wasn't to save you from you. It was to save people from being victimized. But if you're going to put something in your body, I mean, it's just a slippery slope. And so to me, that's where I spoke out, and I got a lot of credibility from being on Fox and CNN and things like that, so that when people started coming to me, asked me back in 2011, 2012, would I start investing in the space? And it was not just no, it was hell no. I'm like, the LAPD still has battle rams, and they will come to
shutting down things actively and turning off power and.
Oh, but I thought they would come to my house and basically take me to jail or feds, or because right. a lot of the cops didn't appreciate my point of view and being very public. So I was like a hard no, and I wanted to advocate against the war on drugs and legalize and regulate, and marijuana was first up. Now it's mushrooms, and I'm hoping that through what's going on in society today, that we actually have a good discussion about legalizing and regulating all drugs.
Yeah, which 20 years ago, when you started being vocal about it as part of LEAP, it was a radical thought. Big time radical. And I'm sure your former law enforcement or your law enforcement friends, but also other people in your life were like, what's going on here? What are you doing? Because
one of my brothers was sheriff's deputy who just recently retired. He still hates that. And what I can't seem to get is my friends that appreciate guns, and I appreciate the Second Amendment, hate weed, hate the drugs. And the folks on the weed side and the drug side, and I love them too, and have been fighting for legalization, they hate guns. And it's like, everybody sort of wants the same thing. We just start bridging society to look, and I'll be the first one, Dave, to tell you, look, I know your lovely family, you have kids. I don't want to see any of your kids using heroin. I don't want to see them using tobacco. But if they choose to do it, it's there. Whether it's legal or not, it's widely available. Right. And we have this epidemic of people dying of opioid deaths because they're getting fentanyl. And at the end of the day, if they could buy legally regulated heroin, it's the least worst idea. Still not good, but what we have now is not working. We spent over $1 trillion on the drug war, and we are the most jailing population on the planet, more than China.
For nonviolent offenses.
For nonviolent offenses.
Where you're only harming yourself.
Right, and then you can't vote, although some of that's changing.
Yeah.
You're disenfranchised. You can't get public housing. You can't get this. You can't get that. Yeah. And then, that person may have kids, and now who's going to take care of the kids? It's just bad on every level of society. So I'm hoping, as we see that marijuana legalization the world has not ended. In fact, the world's gotten a lot better. And I'm hoping that we see this just, change across society.
Well, I always look at the cannabis industry right now in 2020 as there's not a better opportunity to create jobs and create tax revenue for cities and states and the federal government and people that and the government's going to need it to continue to provide the level of service, considering what's happening in the world today. The other part of that has been, again, there's been no bigger example of systemic racism in this country than the war on drugs in terms of how it's been played out. And I think that, for you and this current bubbling up of sentiment against police officers, a lot of that is rooted in having to enforce the war on drugs. And not, in police departments having to do their job that is made by politicians and lawmakers, and they're the ones that have to be that enforcement arm.
Look, I don't like war. I was against the war in Iraq. People thought I was crazy. Now all of a sudden that seems to be just like marijuana. But I, at no point ever felt any animosity towards any soldier. Anybody who's out there putting their life on the line, even if I think the war is misguided, I support them. And the same thing with law enforcement. When I call 911, when anyone calls 911, and I used to work in South Central where it is dangerous, and the murders going up, they're not going up in Bel Air. They're not going up in parts of the city where that's not allowed. But it's okay. And the politicians will speak a good game, but they're full of it. It's okay for people to die in South Central. It happened back when I was there, and it's happening today. That's where it spikes. And so when you hear defund the police and they start saying, oh, we're going to shift, I am agreeing with shifting, 100%. Shift law enforcement into just where we need the laws enforced. But give them proper funding and measure it like you would any other business to say, the folks in South Central, when they call 911, someone should be there in minutes. Yep. That's how it was in Torrance. And that's where, you and I are neighbors. That's what we get. And it's just not acceptable for poor communities which are communities of color, to not get the proper policing. Your point is a very, very good one, though, Dave, in that we can't blame police officers for enforcing bad laws. We should be, out in front of politicians' homes and saying, change these laws. They shouldn't be on the books. Now police don't arrest for cannabis. Right. Because they do what they're instructed to do. Right. And so at the end of the day, let's not blame the law enforcers. Let's blame our politicians and get them to do the right thing.
Right. And I think there's no better time to push that narrative forward than in 2020 and what's happening. But I think that the how do we solve this narrative hasn't necessarily there's no consensus in the media or anything like that. And this is a major thing that will not solve it, but work to solve, these structural challenges and societal challenges that we're all dealing with and aware of, is rolling these things back and then figuring out support for these communities that have been affected by this. And whether it's community owned and operated retail dispensaries, there's a lot of potential there. But if we're talking about improvement from here and taking advantage of society being, woke as it is in 2020, hopefully more politicians start articulating that properly as part of the solution and the path forward. And I think it comes down to constituents to give them the message. So I completely agree with that. So now you mentioned staying out of cannabis from a business standpoint until it looked like California seems like was going to go on the path of legalization, right? And obviously being a vocal proponent of cannabis, you got to a point where I'm sure even in the medical days, in the Prop 215 era, opportunities were coming your way, right? You want to invest in this grow, or let's go in on this license. With your real estate background, you'll get it, but you're like, I'm not getting involved. And what was that moment when you're like, it's now time to try to bring my entire world together, what I believe in, what I'm good at, and how I make money, right? What was that moment where you're like, I'm going to go full into this industry?
It happened over a period of time, but Prop 19 was California's chance to go from Prop 215 to Prop 64 before anybody else, and that was 2011. And so I was on a lot of different.
Why did that fail?
Soros came in with the money late. It was again Richard Lee, who has Oaksterdam University, put in $1 million. Courageous man, Richard. And they were trying to convince Soros to come in, and he was a funder of the Drug Policy Alliance. He just was late to the dance. And look, Dianne Feinstein, who needs to retire, she came out heavy against it, and I was a lot of times the counterbalance. So was the DA, so was the sheriff, and I know the former DA Steve Cooley, and I knew Lee Baca. I know Lee Baca, and I kind of expected from them, but I was really disappointed in Senator Feinstein flying in here and really pushing it, and it was sort of last minute, not the funding quite there, and it just couldn't quite get over. But to answer your question, in 2013, I saw Colorado and Washington become the first. They passed their Prop 19s, their Prop 64, and so I started going to Denver a lot that year, and I was just looking at. Anytime I'm going to invest somewhere, whether it's in Europe or whether it's in Asia or pecan farms in Georgia, place where I've put my money to work, I like to get my shoes dirty. I like to fully understand what is going on, and I felt like this was going to be. We're going to see 1933, which was the end of alcohol prohibition. We're going to see it all over again, and so it was somewhere. The aha moment, I would say, was 2013. I felt, okay, I got to understand this. I couldn't quite invest in Colorado because at the time they didn't want out-of-state money. So I couldn't quite make it work, and I'm a pretty creative person. But it was at that point in 2014 where I said to the team, guys, we're going to go back to California, and we are going to focus here. It's what we know. I'm a lifelong California person. I'm well connected politically. I've got a lot of business experience. I have a lot of investors that have made a lot of money, and I said, let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can go do some good, be impact investors.
Right, and so how has your strategy towards building a California cannabis company changed? Let's just say in the last two and a half, 3 years of legalization.
Yeah, so chalk me up to it's better to be lucky than good, and a lot of the. I was called a lot of the strategies that I had come, and Graham and I were partners almost from the get-go. Graham Farrar, who runs Glasshouse Farms and is a president of Glasshouse Group and a fellow board member. I was more the financial guy, raising the money, and when we'd tie up properties, and so what I would tell you is that I took a really conservative approach in buying our real estate. Landlords still really, really grind the heck out of cannabis tenants, and I was like,
they way overcharge if they don't own the building.
That's what I meant by grind.
Yeah,
they grind them to pieces, and I just found it pretty offensive. So I was able to get in and quite frankly, let's just buy some assets. There's a massive capital dislocation. You can't get loans. You can't get. In real estate, where you see the bottom to the top, and the timing play, which I've been really fortunate to take part in, you could always still get 75% from a bank. So you only need 25%, or maybe a little more, in equity to raise. Here, and then when it goes up, same kind of thing, and it's just you buy low, you sell high. Here, you have no real good debt. Back then, there was no debt. Even today, the debt sucks. And you can't get it from a bank. And raising equity, there's no, the public pension funds are not involved. I mean, they're just it's hard to raise money. And so my thought was, hey, buy some assets, make them cash flowers, do good, and do good by society. And that someday when this kind of shakes out and becomes a big industry, you sell and make a lot of money and it'll be great. And that was the initial plan. And then as we continued to grow and acquire assets, we realized, we could be a vertically integrated company and we could, sell our products, as we saw ourselves, at that point saying we could be a CPG company where we could really, we could grow the best flower at the best prices in California. In Santa Barbara with the ocean breeze, natural, kind of like you go to Whole Foods, and I see you at Whole Foods. You get an orange and it's organic and you feel good about it, and it's grown right and people are paid good wages, and that was just our strategy. And we said, let's learn how to grow good weed. And so we end up, boy, that probably sounds really crass. We grew great cannabis.
Well, Graham, he's an artisan, what he's done and how he grows, and it's unique. And,
yeah.
But filling out, how much greenhouse space is operationalized in the last 12 months, square foot wise, up there?
355,000.
So to get 355,000 square feet off the ground in 12 months and actually hit your targets of when you wanted to launch different sections, that's hard to pull off. There's not a lot of...
We're actually 1 week behind. It's pretty amazing. The fact that he's that close.
Yeah.
Look, Graham, he's a tech guy, and he was like the number 5 guy at Sonos. He was at software.com. He's a genius, and he looks at things. Tech guys always think Moore's law. Twice as fast, half the cost.
Right.
That's like what your iPhone does, right? And so he's always tinkering and thinking. Our core values are we pay everybody $15 an hour. We should, if we're not there yet, every full-time person will have paid health care. HMO, got it, you're good. And so, but, if we can grow with, and he's been able to do it with, more technology, less people, that we take care of the people we have, but we just don't need as many of them. And so, and because we don't have rent, we don't have a mortgage, our cost to grow is, I don't know anybody who's growing as cheaply as we are in a controlled greenhouse space like that. And the whole plan was, once we really dial it in, we get the strains, and it probably takes 2 years to really get to know the microclimate of each greenhouse. We said we'll be the CPG company. We'll just sell it, and we did on a small scale, just kind of getting our feet wet. And then we always felt like once we're ready, we're going to just flip the switch. And over the last few months, we've been flipping the switch, and I think November we'll hit 100,000 jars a month, and then by summer of next year it'll be 250,000 jars. And our goal is to get to 1 million jars a month by the end of 2022.
It's a lot of flower, and that 100,000 jars from this point last year was less than 10,000.
Yeah, something like that. Less.
So being able to transition from a large wholesale cultivator into one where you're making your own branded products is obviously how you maximize the value of that.
Well, I'll tell you how I did, because I needed a CFO, and you brought me.
Well, there was an article where you referenced hiring a good team and the unicorn.
But this isn't the unicorn. That was a different hire that you brought to me. But this was Daryl Kato, who was at Nestle and at Nissan Foods, and so he's been working the supply chain. And I'll tell you what, look, I know what I know, and I know what I don't know, which is much more. And I wish I brought one of the glasshouse jars. When you start thinking about the top, the label, the this, the that, it's really complex. And if you're not tight, supply chain management is really hard. Yeah. And so I had no idea. You only notice things when they go wrong. Everything hits it. But FlowerHire brought Daryl Cotto, and that's the reason we were able to hit 100,000 jars, and that's the reason we'll be able to hit 250,000 jars. And he's brought the cost of the jars down, and it's, I don't call it real time, but it's pretty close. Yeah. I mean, it's impressive.
Well, that ability to do all those things you talked about supply chain wise, and do it compliantly, and get it through testing, and hit your ship dates, it's hard to execute.
It can be daunting, but everybody is in the same boat, and you just have to do it. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the process from finding the right strains that grow in that microclimate that you do really well with, and harvesting them right, and and also remember, trimmers, people that they trim the flower, that was a kind of a nomad lifestyle.
Seasonal, very seasonal.
Yeah, people would go for like a week, and they'd go around, and we turned it into a full-time gig, and some of the folks were like, "I'm ready to stop the merry-go-round," and others were like, "I love the merry-go-round," but it was some of these little challenges that you just don't really think too much about, and getting people to think differently about that job. So
and you've been able to repurpose some of the agricultural workforce that existed around the Oxnard area and things 100%. Like that into the greenhouse.
Look, you're absolutely right.
They're not bending over, all day, and they're actually able to do the same thing and more meaningful thing for society.
So 100%, and I pass the strawberry pickers that, because I love to eat strawberries, but I think of them when I'm driving up there, and they're bent over all day. And what I would tell you is, we don't, the two ways we grow, especially the second one, which really cut costs, so that's going to be the new way we're going to transition the first one. But we use rolling tables. We do things that better on the body, but part of that's just because of the nature of what we're growing versus, I don't know how we would do it if we were strawberries. It is what it is. But absolutely, I have a guy named Alberto who came on early with a guy named Jason. Jason's a grower who's been growing in closets and garages and everything for years and years. So he is your cannabis lover, and then you have
artist.
He's the artist, and Graham and him have known each other since they were kids. So Graham brings his tech, and then we hire Alberto, who's still there, and what he'd done is managed agriculture at farms, managed people. So he just needed Jason to teach the growing techniques. And by the way, Jason had never done it. The first farm was 150,000 square feet. It's big. And so there's all kinds of issues with that. But absolutely, Alberto has been fantastic. And I'm just really proud when I'm up there that, I think we're doing capitalism right, where we consider our workers as stakeholders. It's not just the money. And that's where I think capitalism has been failing since the 70s, thanks to one of your Ivy League schools, Harvard, over there.
USC is the Ivy League of the West Coast, Southern California, not Stanford, obviously, not that caliber, but.
And you know this, and I have a love for my Trojans, and you wear that shirt.
Yeah, and this was a statement, because I did grow up in Austin, Texas, and there's probably not two people in cannabis that care more about that national title game for the 2004 season than us two. That was the greatest game ever played, where the greatest team in history was defeated in the title game. Yeah, I remember that. But do you give every vendor that calls you as hard of a time as you gave me the first time I called you, or do you just hang up immediately?
So, wow, this all of a sudden, this interview took a hard turn. So what I would say is this: I love working with you because you're a relationship guy, and so am I. And poking me in the eye when I've come down here and tried to find parking outside your place, and there's no validation.
We're out of water.
And there's no water, but you have beer. So I would say that you're one of my favorite people in cannabis because you're just a good guy. The Texas thing, when I saw that, I was like, yep, good, nice. I would poke you in the eye too. I just, look, who doesn't love Harvard football? So.
Well, you, I think when I called you, I was referred to you from Graham, and you're like, I need a CFO, public company experience, who's taking a cannabis company public. and I'm only going to pay this, and they're going to work here because we're the best, and you need them to be in Long Beach. And I'm like, you need someone to live in Palos Verdes. And he's like, that's where I live. And I said, me too. And he said, where? And then somehow it ended up with do a hike and meet my team for 5 hours. And hiking is something you do on an interview, with your key hires. And is that because that when they're physically tired, you get truth? Like, why do you do that?
Well, number one, running a cannabis business that has so many arms out there, it takes up quite a bit of your time. Plus, for God's sake, all the time you take on a phone call to introduce you and introduce the person. So at the end of the day, I really want to give the person the focus and the attention that this person deserves, because we're considering a big life change for them, and obviously a big hire. If you're
not making a hire of anyone that hires talent in this industry. Like, you're looking at the person
100%.
And their skill set, and I think that's super critical, because it's not like you're not going a million miles an hour with a million things to do, but you're gonna have to be stuck with this person. You got to make sure about the hire, so you don't have to question it, and you can back it up in the future as you're going through the onboarding process.
Well, and look, a lot of these people are coming from normal industry into cannabis, and so part of that is I want to talk them out of, if you want to be in this business, you need to really want to be in it. And so, you sent me some really good candidates, and I'm very persnickety because, especially in the C-suite, where I'm spending a lot of my time, I need to make sure that number one, I like being with the person, and that they like being with me, because we're going to spend more time together than, if they are, if they have a significant other, they're going to spend more time with me. And like Derek and Daryl pretty much do. So yeah, I like taking them on hikes, and I live up in Palos Verdes, and there's an interview out there where I laid out some of my strategy, so I'll say it here as well. But basically, I like to ask the same question 4 or 5 different ways. And when you're on a hike and we have some ups and downs, and you don't really know where you are because we're out in the middle of nowhere, I'm going to find out if there's a consistency to their story and answers that are important to me. But also, if you're going to hike with somebody and you're getting a sweat, one, I like to think you're in decent enough shape. I'm not trying to, if somebody were disabled, I would certainly look to hire them. We would figure that.
Hypergrowth, takes a lot of energy, and
takes a lot of energy.
And if you're not healthy, it'll take it out of you very quickly.
And let's face it, this is, any growing company going from startup to massive growth, it's going to be very stressful. Yeah. And so I do care about, do you have that stamina? Can you go? Yeah. And so, but I would tell you the main reason, that the number one thing is just so I can turn off my phone. It's usually on a weekend or a Friday morning. I mean, and you spend some time. And that's how, even you, when it was like, okay, this is several years ago, but it's like, okay, wait, you're running basically a headhunting firm in cannabis. Like, what the hell is this?
You're a genius or a quack.
Well, I didn't. Yeah, exactly. I didn't know but I was like, okay, and I didn't want to waste my time, because look, I've run a growing business, and I've worked with people that bring, you're not the first person I've ever worked with, but in cannabis, I was like, wow, this is pretty interesting, and so I just wanted to understand, and it's like, okay, I mean, I don't know how many times you told me you went to an Ivy League school. I mean, Jesus Christ.
You've gotten that school wrong every time we've spoken. But I know you have a hard stop. So Cornell University, Texas
look at that. Yeah,
2004 national champs. Kyle Kazan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Total pleasure, man. And congratulations on, if you want to be in this industry, the parking sucks for sure, but you're sitting here right in Manhattan Beach in front of the pier, and Dave's probably either here at Shellbacks down the street. So, but I would tell you, he's the guy, and everybody, all the industry is calling him now. So you want to be in it, the quickest way is not to call a person like me, but to call Dave.
Thank you.